We are going to have today the continuation of a saga of lectures that we have been presenting here in the United States, which have to do with this future and upcoming civil war. We have been showing, in the two previous batches of lectures, how everything is being plotted for this to take place. In addition, we have analyzed some prophetic writings that give clear signs of how it is going to be and what is going to happen, not only until it takes place, but also the subsequent steps and what is going to be achieved precisely with it. Remember that, after finishing these 4 conferences today, which we have divided into 2 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon, we will have a brief interval between each of them. There will be one more part, not today, but God willing, soon, also here in the United States, we will show the final part of where all this is going to lead. Actually, many people are going to be surprised, because sometimes we can think of a civil war as the usual, a war in which people kill each other, and so on. However, there are a number of factors to take into account, which will be the final straw, and many people have no idea of what is coming, which goes far beyond what anyone can think of. To think and to see at present, but soon, things are going to change, and we are going to show that. As usual in this series of conferences, we are going to have news readings in each one of them, one after the other, to situate us in everything that is happening right now in the United States in relation to this topic. At the end of each of these news readings, we will also read a part of the book The Great Controversy, which is where it really uncovers not only why this war is going to happen, but all the consequences it will have. The title of today's lecture saga is USA, Civil War and the Triumph of Rome. This is the part that many people don't know about. You know there are people who are talking about the Civil War in the United States. Even in a TV program of TV3, the TV in Catalonia, where we come from, there has been a whole program showing how a civil war is really coming in the United States. I was surprised that they already dealt with this topic, and this very week they published it. Well, obviously, they will talk about all this, but they are missing a key piece, why this civil war is really going to happen. Let's start, first, with something that I presented before, which is a writing of Ellen White, where, precisely, it was already shown by prophecy, revealed how this civil war will go. She wrote this in Manuscript 11 of 1899, and I repeat it in case someone has not seen the previous lectures. I also tell you that if you have not seen the earlier ones, stop here. Look up the other parts that we did before, and you will, of course, catch perfectly everything that is being expounded here today. She wrote this: in India, China, Russia, and the cities of America, thousands of men and women are dying of starvation. The moneyed men, because they have the power, control the market. They purchase at low rates all they can obtain, and then sell at greatly increased prices. This means starvation to the poorer classes, and will result in a civil war. So it comes because of an economic situation. People will not have easy access to be able to buy, and everything will move in such a way that there will be precisely a civil war. Obviously, you know that the subject of the economy does not usually happen just because, but there are agents that are moving so that these monetary goods are produced, and here it is telling us. Why? Because there are people who have more and more resources, but they are very few, and most of them will have less and less. And someone, we shall see, will be working to bring this to fruition, and its fruit will be civil war. She ends by saying, there will be a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation. And at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince which standeth for the children of thy people. And there shall be a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time. And at that time thy people shall be delivered, everyone that shall be found written in the book. Many shall be purified, and made white, and tried, but the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand. Once again, as you go over this quote, you see more and more details, and this is very much linked to something that has never been there before, and that is a time when the uprising, the rising up of someone, of Michael, of Christ, is already being prepared. And what does this imply? Yes, obviously, there is a judgment for the living that has been going on for years, but this goes even further. This is already part of what points directly to the return of Christ, literally, as it is, in person. Well, you see what countries she quotes: India, China, Russia. People are having more and more economic problems. This will increase, not decrease, and this is what will end up provoking a civil war. But now we are going to go precisely into the news, and we are going to count on Angel and Luis, so that they start reading one after the other, to see how the situation is hot and how far it is getting. You see, far-right influencers turn against Trump's campaign. The far-right provocateurs are taking aim at the way the former president's advisors are positioning him for the November election, though not at the Republican candidate himself. Stay tuned, because sometimes those of us of a certain age may not realize the influence of certain people in certain media. And now there are the famous influencers, you know who they are. Well, let's see what they tell us here. Notice that this news item is from August 18th, 2024.
Some of the internet's most influential far-right figures are turning against former President Donald Trump's campaign, threatening digital warfare against the Republican candidate's aides and allies, which could complicate the party's calls for unity in the final weeks of the presidential race. Nick Fuentes, a white supremacist and podcaster who dined with Trump at his Mar-a-Lago resort in Palm Beach in 2022, said in X that Trump's campaign was ruined by not positioning itself further to the right and was headed for a catastrophic loss. In a post that, as of Wednesday, had been viewed 2.6 million times.
Do you notice that they say he has loosened his far-right position, and this is hurting him? You have to go further to the far right, they say. That means a lot more conservatism.
Laura Loomer, a far-right activist whom Trump called last year very special, said his weak proxies had undone his momentum and that his approach needs to change fast because we can't talk about a stolen election for another 4 years. In an X post that received more than 8,000 likes. And Candace Owens, a far-right influencer with 5 million followers who was photographed with Trump in March, described conservative infighting on a podcast Tuesday as a mega civil war fueled by anger because Trump's policies and personality had been softened to increase his overall appeal.
They even call it mega civil war.
I'm not sure who's at the helm of the megabus anymore, she said, making it clear that, like other far-right influencers, her problem is not with Trump, but with his staff. They're losing that support from the people who believed in you. You need those people. The insider attacks that come as other supporters call for Trump to take a more disciplined, policy-oriented approach to his campaign highlight a new vulnerability in one of the loudest corners of Trump's national base. With millions of followers, far-right provocateurs have long been one of the most reliable engines for gaining Trump's attention online, helping to build the viral energy that fueled his political career and his strong lead among predominantly white male voters. Trump embraced far-right internet celebrities ahead of the 2016 and 2020 elections, even inviting some to the White House for a social media summit in 2019.
Notice how social media is determining what will ultimately be public opinion and thus votes.
As Trump's campaign faces a decline in the polls, far-right activists argue that he has failed to take more right-wing positions on race and immigration. They have also called for the campaign to fire its co-directors Chris Lachivita and Sushi Wills, whom they blame for lackluster strategy. Many of the campaign's far-right critics said they still strongly support Trump himself, but some of them have vowed to attack the campaign online and at Trump campaign events unless it changes course. That presents a challenge for campaign officials who have struggled to publicly disavow or ignore extremist voices for fear they could alienate voters.
So, they are pushing him to move toward those more extreme positions.
On Thursday, Trump's campaign reshuffle, which included the rehiring of his 2016 campaign manager, Corey Lewandowski, led Fuentes to declare a first victory for his campaign, despite Trump's public praise for Lachivita and Wilds. Online, Loomer mocked Fuentes, saying he had nothing to do with the return of Lewandowski, co-author of the book, Let Trump Be Trump, and said he should stop pretending he's in charge.
That's interesting. Stop pretending he's in charge. Well, the truth is, everybody should stop pretending this, because the people we see on the front lines are not the ones in charge. There are people who are the real puppeteers.
Some campaign officials previously argued that far-right influencers offer value by amplifying political messages for their audiences. But Fuentes' recent, more open attacks on his followers who call themselves gropers have become a noisy and counterproductive distraction for the campaign, said one person familiar with his operations, who spoke on condition of anonymity in order to discuss private conversations. In any case, Fuentes is hurting the idea of bringing new blood into the campaign because it makes it that much harder for Trump if he appears to be responding to the harassers, the source said. When asked for comment, the Trump campaign referenced an August 11th Truth Social post in which Trump said he was leading in almost every real poll and that his team was doing a great job. Appearing that day on CBS, Trump's running mate, J.D. Vance, called Fuentes a total loser and said the proper response was to ignore trolls like him until they disappear. However, the far-right criticism has proved unsettling to some of Trump's most loyal online supporters. Brendan Dilley, a pro-Trump podcaster in Georgia, asked Monday whether Fuentes and others who had attacked Trump were part of a secret psyop designed to bolster the narrative of Kamala Harris's surge vote argument. I have a job to do, and these people are a problem, Dilley said. They're getting a payoff? They're being deployed as a collective. I don't know. Fuentes said he was not paid and acted only to promote his views and defined as far-right reactionary. Colin Henry, a George Washington University researcher who has studied online political extremism, said far-right influencers have been visibly frustrated in recent weeks by Trump's declining performance in the polls and the campaign's rejection of hardline policy proposals like Project 2025.
Do you remember we were talking about Project 2025 at the previous conference? Well, that is still moving, and of course you can see how far they are getting to push, because those who are more extreme right-wingers than even Donald Trump himself apparently do not see enough on everything he is saying and what a lot of things he is saying. They want it to go further, because otherwise, Kamala Harris gets the votes. Maybe you will also say, well, but here you are showing a certain media. But there are others who are from the other side. Well, we are going to see information from different media so that we can form a general opinion.
They saw it as a warning shot from ordinary people who wanted to do all this with policies and institutions, he said. The anger from far-right influencers is important because they have proven adept at making their voices heard in conservative circles in a way that could hurt the Trump campaign, said Ben Lorber, a senior fellow at Political Research Associates, a Massachusetts think tank that monitors right-wing groups. This move has the ability to move conservative discourse and open up space much further to the right of acceptable conservative opinion, so that people like Trump can move even further to the right, he said. During Trump's conversation Monday with billionaire X-owner Elon Musk, Fuentes ordered his followers, via a live stream, to repeatedly post their views on X, where several of his demands for changes in the campaign rose to the top of the platform's trending topics. His followers spearheaded a parallel campaign on Trump's social network, Truth Social, and messages like "No More Immigration" remained among the most popular hashtags. The morning after the interview, Fire the Chivita interview, with 20,000 recent posts, eclipsed even Trump 2024. Fuentes has also told his followers that they should start collecting phone numbers and email addresses of campaign officials so they can contact them massively. In an interview, Fuentes said he intended to push his supporters to adopt guerrilla tactics and ramp up pressure in the real world, including through mass appearances at Trump rallies in battleground states like Michigan, until the campaign had met his demands to drop independence. He has urged his supporters to refrain from voting for Trump, saying it was the only way to wake up a campaign that lacked energy and enthusiasm. "If they blame me for Trump losing, so be it," he said. He will have lost because he stopped talking to the MAGA base he had in 2016. Loomer and Owens did not respond to requests for comment. Jarrett Holt, a senior fellow at the Institute for Strategic Dialogue who studies online hate and extremism, said Fuentes appears to have lost some of the influence and prestige he gained during Trump's presidency, but he retains a cult following among young conservatives who could indirectly influence the campaign to adopt more extreme positions.
Notice that he's talking about young conservatives who may influence to adopt more extreme positions. He's not talking about older people, he's talking about young people. So very conservative young people, and those young people, where do they tend to be? They tend to be in churches. They are in churches.
Fuentes contributors have worked for far-right members of Congress, including Representatives Marjorie Taylor Greene, Republican Georgia, and Paul Gosar, Republican Arizona. At times, Fuentes' messaging, which advocates for a white ethno-state in the U.S. in which even legal immigration is banned, has closely aligned with more established pro-Trump narratives. A Tuesday tweet from the Trump War Room campaign account captioned a photo of black men, "Your neighborhood under Kamala," and warned, "Import the third world, become the third world."
What kind of message? They are really strong. Think that many of you here are migrants, and for them you see what perspective they want to impose on this country.
Vance has been asked several times in television interviews about Trump's dinner with Fuentes. And on Sunday, he told ABC that just because you talk to someone doesn't mean you endorse their views. On live streams and social media, Fuentes has rallied his followers to launch what he calls Riper War 2, a sequel to a series of chaotic shows in 2019, during which they showed up en masse at events and conferences of people they considered fake conservatives to boo and pepper them with provocative questions about issues like race and LGBTQ+ rights. Amanda Moore, a left-wing activist and researcher who has followed Fuentes' group, said this effort was extremely successful in helping far-right influencers get the word out about their ideology. Their goal is to push the party to the right, and they got exactly what they wanted, Morse said, adding that their success has come at cost of Trump, as it has made his base more volatile. This is what happens when you stand your ground for years. This is where we'll get you.
Well, you've seen a whole description in this extensive news story of how everything is being moved, increasingly, by people on the very far right, even young people, to influence, and they're succeeding. They are succeeding in getting a certain direction, but in spite of everything, we are going to see even more things that will not cease to surprise us. To pay his debts, Donald Trump earned $300,000 selling Bibles. Remember, we also introduced the topic of these Bibles. God Bless the USA Bible, the result of a partnership with singer Lee Greenwood, is sold for $6 each. Well, that's not an excessive price either, you might think, right? But what do you do with all this? Let's see.
For Donald Trump, all means are good for making money. The sale of Bibles brought the former U.S. president $300,000, according to a financial document that the BBC was able to consult. On past March, the Republican candidate announced that he was launching this new business to meet his exorbitant financial costs, especially related to his legal affairs.
This means, the problems he has at the judicial level.
On March 26th, the re-election candidate promoted his favorite book in a short video posted on his social network, Truth Social. Every American should have a Bible at home. I have several, and I think we should all get a copy of the Bible now, he said.
Well, he's saying he has several. It's another thing to study it, isn't it? But the same could be said of the other side.
A signed copy for $1,000, called God Bless the USA, with a sober brown cover, the Holy Book sells on Lee Greenwood's site and on an exclusive website for $59.99. This country singer is known for his song God Bless the USA, which became Donald Trump's campaign anthem. The artwork also includes the U.S. Constitution, Bill of Rights, Declaration of Independence, Pledge of Allegiance to the U.S. flag, as well as the lyrics to Lee Greenwood's signature title. Also for sale is a copy of the God Bless the USA Bible signed by Donald Trump for just $1,000.
Notice that it says this work includes the U.S. Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence, the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, and so on. The U.S. Constitution. What did we see in the previous parts? And what more will we see? The U.S. Constitution is going to be dynamited. And precisely he who included this in the Bible is one of those who said that this Constitution has a problem. It is interesting because you realize how a series of factors are being used to give a public opinion that favors. But there is something that is moving behind that. If you are not picking up pieces from one side or the other, you do not find out. You realize that, really, as we say there, this is a scam, a deception. In other words, it looks like one thing, but behind it there is another.
The sale of these Bibles in Trump Greenwood version generates royalties thanks to which the candidate is remunerated. According to the financial document revealed by the BBC, Donald also received $5 million in royalties for books he wrote himself and owns between $1 million and $5 million in cryptocurrencies, enough to help him finance the significant costs related to his legal cases, including his lawyers' fees to the tune of $50 million, not to mention the approximately $100 million he owes for the lawsuits he lost.
Here you have precisely this Bible in English translated into Spanish. Interesting, eh? God bless the United States. Yes, bless the United States. And what, precisely in the past, was like that? We are seeing how it is increasingly doing the opposite. Do you remember the prophecy of Revelation? It started out as a lamb? Yes, but eventually it spoke as a dragon. And speaking like a dragon, you know what that means, legislating and doing things that really imply the opposite of what it first appeared to be. And in the beginning it really was like that, but things went wrong and now we are entering those days of the final prophecy where, precisely, the United States will have little blessing from God, rather the opposite. Of course, these are things to think about, and a lot. Here you see what is contained in the Bible God Bless the USA, edition The Day God Intervened. What does this remind you of the day God intervened? A certain shot, right? This beautiful God Bless the USA Bible has been embossed to remember the day God intervened during the assassination attempt on President Donald J. Trump. Awesome. Anything is good to make a Bible and raise money. Look at this other news item, 5 things to watch out for at the Democratic National Convention. We're not going to read them all, let's highlight a few.
What role will religion play? There will be prayer. Denominational conventions usually feature religious speakers who reflect on religious themes and lead the prayer room. But given the increasing secularization of the Democratic Party in recent years and the renunciation of religious practices in public spaces, it is certain how prominently religion will be highlighted in Chicago.
Precisely. Remember that when we were presenting the previous lecture saga, it was in Chicago, and that's when they just happened to have that Democratic convention there. What a coincidence, isn't it? We didn't do it specifically? Not at all. It just happened to coincide. Well, it is that we were in the place to say the things where these things were being done that now here they are beginning to analyze. They were wondering then, what will be the role of religion for them if the Democratic Party is more and more secularized and has more and more tendency to move away from the religious issue? Would there be prayers there? Would there be a religious weight in this whole issue? You know that here in the United States this is vital. I am very surprised when I follow the news from the United States and you realize that, really, here there is either a religious issue or there is nothing to do about. The candidates are staying on the sidelines. Well, look at what he's telling us.
Harris comes from an interfaith home. Her mother was Hindu, her father is Christian, and her husband is Jewish. Harris is a Baptist, although she rarely mentions her faith. Many who attended the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee noted the number of prayers each night. The stark contrast between the conventions has the potential to be shocking.
Well, it was really shocking because there was a prayer theme. Why was that? Well, because they know that, really, if they don't introduce these concepts here in this country, they are left out of the vote. This, where we come from, it is unthinkable that someone could talk about religious issues and this would influence the votes. Well, it is the opposite, isn't it? Yes. Cardinal Cupid criticizes fear of the other and calls for unity at the Democratic Convention. Yes, you see, at that convention the Archbishop of Chicago appeared. And now we are going to see a video that, honestly, I don't know if you have seen it, but I think that, if you have not seen it, it is not going to leave you indifferent at all. This video, you see, is titled Interview with Trump Supporters in Illinois. Do you want to see the statements? Well, stay tuned. Let's get into the video.
Who do you think is going to be in the White House in January?
I truly believe Trump will be there. I really do. I really do. Yeah.
You think the same?
Yeah. If it's not, we're going to be in trouble.
Yeah, I think so.
This is the last great hope.
Yeah.
And I think she will destroy it.
Civil war, there'd be a revolution.
You think that'd be if he's not in or if he is in?
I guarantee if they steal it, there'd be a revolution. We the people own plenty of firearms. There's more gun owners than enlisted servicemen, and they are not going to go against patriots. I don't care what color camouflage comes after me.
I just think what you're saying about the potential for people taking arms and being violent, that's quite scary.
This is the holy war in the United States. We're fighting for God by voting for Trump.
On August 21st, journalist Marta Kellner, who works for Sky News, interviewed several Trump supporters in a town in Illinois, very close to where the Democratic National Convention was held, where candidate Kamala Harris was officially ratified.
It is subtitled because, obviously, it is in English. We have subtitled it in Spanish. People who claim that there are more armed people than soldiers. In short, among the civilian population there are more armed people than soldiers, and that they will not attack people who are patriots. But they say that if things don't go their way, if Donald Trump doesn't win, there's going to be civil war because it's a religious war, a holy war. I mean, is that of course, you say, for a moment, if you just hear this, what do you think? Yikes! I must be in Iran, because that's what they're selling us like we are in Iran, right? And it turns out that this is happening in the United States. People who may now be very peaceful, very cordial, and we've noticed it when we've come to this country on previous occasions, the moment you talk to them about whether there may be civil war, and they tell you that they will take weapons, that they have no problem for that. Yikes! This is very strong. So, how many days until the elections? They are on November 5th, 2024. What day is it? October 12th. So, how many weeks are left? More or less, 3. Well, in 3 weeks we have to be aware of what is happening, because you know that we have already talked about the Civil War coming for economic reasons. Therefore, things should get even more complicated, economically speaking. With people from here, from the United States, they tell me that, as the economy is going down, it is getting worse. People are not making ends meet, as they say, and this is causing unrest. Well, this is going to be taken advantage of in one way or another, because it will not get better, it will get worse. And think that the United States is engaged in something that causes them a significant economic drain, and that is war conflicts. It is true that it generates great profits for some, those who make armaments, but at the same time, the population is losing economical health because of this. And if there is a more intense conflict in the Middle East, what will happen? The price of oil, gas, and materials will rise. All this affects the economic issues of each country, and especially here as well. Therefore, the scene is getting ready for something to happen. We may consider civil war before November 5th. We do not know. It will be right after when it will be said who has won. We do not know. Or it will be just a short time after. We do not know either. We cannot affirm by prophecy that it will happen, and we are seeing how everything is in front of us for it to happen. It will happen with the Sunday law that will be imposed from here, from the United States. You know that Ellen White talks about that. The moment the Sunday law is imposed, the national ruin begins. Will that be the moment? 2028, we don't know yet, but the thing is that it is really very close. And now, lo and behold, Musk signs an anti-law to prevent banks from freezing Floridians' bank accounts based on their politics. But the Treasury says the law puts U.S. national security at risk. But is it just an issue because of this, or is there more to it? It says here it depends on their policy issue. You're going to see how it can also be a religious issue. News on August 21st.
The Treasury Department has criticized Florida's new anti-banking law. warning that it could open the floodgates for criminals to use and manipulate the U.S. financial system. The new state law HB 989, signed by Florida Governor Ron DeSantis in May, states that it would be unsafe and unwise for banks to consider non-financial factors such as politics, religion, or environmental, social, and corporate governance factors when doing business.
What do you think? Politics, religion, and the environment. In short, social and corporate governance issues. All of these could be looked at for someone's economy to be cut off.
We reject a global elite trying to impose ideology on us by capturing important institutions, said DeSantis, who has led an aggressive campaign against so-called woke ideology in the Sunshine State by signing HB 989 into law. We're not going to allow big banks to discriminate based on someone's political or religious beliefs.
Pretty impressive this, huh? What will the Sunday law be? They will ban buying and selling. And for what? Because of religious beliefs. All this is already brewing. Sometimes, we think this will be just a Sunday law and that's it, but it doesn't just come out of nowhere. There are steps beforehand.
But while DeSantis claims he is fighting discrimination, the U.S. Treasury has labeled the Florida law and similar laws being considered in mostly conservative states like Arizona, Georgia, Idaho, Indiana, Iowa, Kentucky, Louisiana, and South Dakota as a potential threat to national security. This is the reason policymakers are at odds over so-called unbanning and what it means for Americans. Florida discourages unbanking. DeSantis' target on HB 989 law was to strengthen protection for Florida's consumers, in order to avoid them to be discouraged from adopting ideologies or reflecting preferred political behavior. According to an Associated Press report, DeSantis said the law will protect the access that conservative groups and the firearms industry have to the financial sector and prevent their accounts from being frozen or closed. The law makes it unlawful for banks to deny, cancel, suspend, or terminate services to a person or otherwise discriminate against a person by making such services available based on a number of factors, including, but not limited to, the person's views, speech, and political affiliations. Any factor other than an unbiased, risk-based quantitative standard, including any factor related to the person's business sector or the person's involvement in a lawful manufacture, distribution, sale, purchase, or use of firearms or ammunition. The person's involvement in the exploitation, production, use, transportation, sale, or manufacture of fossil fuel-based energy, timber, mining, or agriculture. Also allows Floridians to appeal unwarranted account terminations and restrictions through a coordinated complaint and investigation process within the state's Office of Financial Regulation. This particularly puts banks and other financial institutions operating in the Sunshine State between a rock and a hard place. Federal law requires them to implement U.S. national security and criminal policies, including stringent background checks. But in doing so, they risk violating Florida's broad anti-discrimination law. Treasury strikes back. The Treasury has openly criticized Florida's new law and any other state law that prohibits financial institutions from conducting the required risk assessments. In a July letter to lawmakers, obtained by the Wall Street Journal, Treasury Secretary Brian Nelson reiterated the importance of banks being able to screen customers to prevent money laundering and counter terrorist financing. State laws, he said, interfere with the ability of financial institutions to meet national security requirements and increase the risk that international drug traffickers, transnational organized cartels, terrorists, and corrupt foreign officials will use the U.S. financial system to launder money, evade sanctions, and threaten our national security, he wrote. The letter was sent in response to a July 8th request from Representative Josh Gottheimer, DNJ, Representative Blaine Luetkemeyer, Republican from Missouri, and Representative Brad Sherman, Democrat for California, who share concerns about the potentially negative impact of the new unbanking laws. To any state considering similar laws, I urge you to think twice before putting the national security of the United States at risk, Gottheimer said in a statement.
You see, there's even talk of national security with all these issues. Can you imagine when the Sunday law comes out? It's going to be national security too. Well, let's keep going, because there's still more. By the way, Ron DeSantis, you know he is a staunch Catholic, and look where he is saying things that, at first sight, would favor that there could be no Sunday law, but we already know that things are going to change, and boy, are they going to change? Planned Parenthood president and abortion advocates speak at the Democratic National Convention. Yes, they were there too. We saw prayers, we saw church service people, but this August 22nd news story tells us that there was also all this stuff that you know what it's all about, abortion. Look at this other news. RFK Jr. says that, you know, the nephew of John Fitzgerald Kennedy, who was assassinated, says he's suspending the 2024 campaign and is joining Donald Trump at a rally in Arizona. Kennedy's brothers called his support for Trump treasonous. I don't know if you saw this in the media here. It was stunning, because this gentleman, who was campaigning independently of the other two candidates, finally joins Donald Trump because he is a conservative. You know, they go so far as to say that he was the famous Q. Do you know who he is? Did you hear about Q here in this country? It doesn't sound familiar? We are more informed on the other side of the pond than we are here. This is worrisome because it means that the media here is not saying things that should make people think. They say they're the ones responsible for the attack on the White House, who say Trump was behind it. QAnon. Well, now you see it's taken a turn, and you'll see how also Donald Trump said he's a great guy. He's very, very good. He's in the height of it, but it's that from the Kennedy family they're leaving him all colors. They're calling him everything but handsome. They are calling them traitors because they say that the Kennedys were indeed Catholic people, but in a way liberal, and he is not, quite the opposite.
If President Trump is elected and keeps his word, the huge burden of chronic disease that is now demoralizing and bankrupting the country will disappear, Kennedy said. For me, this is a spiritual journey. I came to my decision through deep prayer and uncompromising logic, and I asked myself, what decisions must I make to maximize my chances of saving America's children and restoring national health, he said. He continued, I felt that if I turned down this opportunity, I could not look in the mirror knowing that I could have saved the lives of countless children and the epidemic of chronic disease in this country.
So, he sees it as a religious, prayer issue, and so he decided.
Members of his own family also criticized his views and his presidential candidacy. 15 members of the Kennedy family made a statement in endorsing Biden at a campaign rally in Philadelphia while he was still in the race. 5 of his siblings released a joint statement Friday saying they believed in Vice President Kamala Harris and her running mate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. We want an America filled with hope and united by a shared vision of a brighter future, a future defined by individual freedom, economic promise, and national pride. We believe in Harris and Walz, said Kathleen Kennedy Townsend, Courtney Kennedy, Kerry Kennedy, Chris Kennedy, and Rory Kennedy. Our brother Bobby's decision to support Trump today is a betrayal of the values our father and our family hold most dear. They went on to say that it is a sad ending to a sad story.
What a statement, huh? I mean, Robert Kennedy has broken up the family, duh. All in all, with all this, let's now look at more news that continues to show us data that, if we fit it all into context, we will understand it much better. Most schools in the UK are removing their LGBTQ plus books from the libraries. Do you know what this means? It's a return to morality. News from August 27th. Yes, return of morality, false morality. But, apparently, this is what they are doing. Morality.
They're doing it at the request of some parents. A 6-month investigation by Index on Censorship found that 28 of 53 librarians surveyed, representing 53%, claimed they had been asked to remove books. In more than half of these cases, the books were removed from the shelves. A librarian at one school that participated in the study was allegedly instructed to remove all LGBTQ plus themed books following a single complaint from a parent about a particular book. Which LGBTQ plus books have been removed? Among the titles that have received complaints are This Book is Gay by Juno Dawson, Julian is a Mermaid by Jessica Love, and ABC Pride by Elle Stoll, Ellie Barnes, and Emmy Phelps. Several schools faced book challenges, including several Heartstopper titles by Alice Oseman, which were criticized for homophobic language, profanity, and discussions of self-harm. More than half of the book removal requests came from parents. Many librarians who requested anonymity in the survey for fear of retaliation expressed concern about the possibility of losing their jobs if they refused to agree to book removals. Some reported defying orders by directly offering unofficial loans in a back closet, even though they faced being fired. It is possible that the UK bans are influenced by the trend of book censorship in the US, which reached record highs last year.
Now there's talk about the UK, too. Can you see that? Something is happening that is turning everything into a morality. What is happening in Europe? Which political parties are starting to impose themselves, the so-called extreme right-wing ones? And this is food for thought, and a lot of it. Even in a nation like Germany or Austria, where you know Nazism emerged. Well, we're seeing it as a trend. It's not just in the United States.
According to PEN America, an organization that advocates for free speech, in the 2022 to 2023 school year, there were 1,477 cases of book banning that have affected 874 unique titles in the U.S.
Didn't you know about this? And these are numbers, you see, not a small quantity.
Of the 874 unique book titles banned in the index, 44% include themes or instances of violence and physical abuse, 38% cover student health and wellness issues, including content on mental health, bullying, suicide, substance abuse, as well as books that discuss sexual wellness and puberty. 30% include characters of color or discuss race and racism. 26% feature LGBTQ plus characters or themes. In an initiative launched by LeVar Burton, star of Star Trek, The Next Generation, and host of Reading Rainbow, nearly 200 celebrities signed a petition against the U.S. book ban. Signers include Ariana Grande, Guillermo del Toro, Mark Ruffalo, Sharon Stone, Billy Porter, Aisha Tyler, and Judy Blume. It's shameful that we are banning books in this country, in this culture, in these times. And it's dangerous that a handful of individuals are deciding that any book featuring Black and queer people is divisive, said Burton, executive producer of the 2023 documentary, The Right to Read. We call on everyone to join us and raise their voices to defend artistic freedom, embrace multicultural history, and put an end to book bans once and for all.
Notice that this is reminiscent of times when, for example, we in Spain lived in the times of Generalissimo Franco, where there were things that were totally censored, whether they were books, whether they were movies, and there were scenes that were cut directly because they were a scandal for that time, for the Catholic mentality of the rulers of Spain. Well, and for normal people it should be too sometimes. I am not saying that I am in favor of what was being done, far from it, because sometimes they were quite over the top. But now that same thing is happening in a country that is theoretically as free as the United States. Something is changing here. Hey, look at this other news. The Pope received the leaders of organized communities in the United States. August 28th. And what does all this have to do with anything? Who are these leaders of organized communities?
On the afternoon of August 28th, the Holy Father received at Casa Santa Marta the leaders of the Organized Communities of the United States, Industrial Areas Foundation, and Southwest. They presented the path taken by the Ecclesial Network of Organized Communities, RECOR. To communicate the Holy Father the path they have taken and to consult him on the steps to be taken. This was the purpose of the meeting on Wednesday, August 28th, between leaders of organized communities in the United States and Pope Francis of the Vatican's Casa Santa Marta. About 20 leaders, including priests and lay people, presented RECOR this afternoon to the Pontiff the new ecclesial network of organized communities, which seeks, accompanied by their Catholic bishops, to assume the leadership of forming and putting into practice the social doctrine of the Church with the aim of guaranteeing a lifestyle with a gospel flavor.
They are organized, they are influential Catholics in the United States, and they are coming together to take the lead in forming and putting into practice the Church's social doctrine. Do you know what this means? That they are the ones who are going to move the grassroots of the entire population toward a goal. And how will the Church's social doctrine help the population? By winning over the population through aid. You know that the Pope says that there shouldn't be proselytism, but instead, we work so that people see that there are fruits that are made out of love. And then they earn it, of course. You don't fail in a strategic move. They are all working to achieve this, a gospel-flavored lifestyle. But which gospel? Just to help?
Meeting with Pope Francis. In the meeting at Casa Santa Marta, Pope Francis encouraged the leaders in building the synodal bridge so that our peoples may have life. Pope Francis greatly appreciates the capacity of a people to organize itself. The richness of a people is found in its capacity to organize. Moreover, he reminded us of the words of Paul VI, who said that politics is the highest expression of charity. This is what Jorge Montiel, IF organizer in the western and southwestern U.S., said after the meeting with the Holy Father.
Did you notice this phrase of Pope Paul VI, politics is the highest expression of charity? So, what are you going to do? Just help the grassroots people? No, this is already about doing something else, getting into politics to get everyone on their turf. Then they say they don't get involved in politics.
Maria Guadalupe Valdez, from the Diocese of San Antonio, Texas, said that the Pope encouraged them to move forward, to act, and not to remain indifferent. Elizabeth Valdez, member of the Industrial Areas Foundation West-Southwest, recalled that the network is made up of churches, unions, universities, and other organizations with a majority participation of Catholics, in addition to Protestant churches, synagogues, and mosques.
Therefore, this is also about ecumenism. It is not only Catholics, they are the majority, but it is also made up of churches and unions. I don't know if you saw the conference I presented many years ago. I don't know if it was number 11 or 12, where I showed who was behind the creation of the unions. Didn't you see it? Yes, and who was it? The Catholic Church. They do good things, obviously, but at other times they are the ones they praise to achieve some objectives and sometimes with some means. You can imagine how. But this also includes universities and other organizations. So, they are working among the Protestants, the Jews, and the Muslim world to bring them to a place where they all help each other, but where they all go together. But who is the mover and shaker? Is it the Islam, the Protestants, the Jews? No, it is the Catholics led by the Pope. Therefore, I present all this to you so that we realize that everything that is taking place is really being done by someone who is working behind it. And although it will be true that the Protestants are the ones who are going to work basically for the imposition of the Sunday law, this is the key to everything. There has been a movement before, more underneath, which is led by Catholicism itself, infiltrating certain organizations and religions, in order to bring them to associate in an ecumenism. Things don't happen so easily if you don't work for it. And he goes on to tell us something else.
This morning, representatives of the Industrial Areas Foundation West Southwest met with Emil Skuda, Secretary of the Pontifical Commission for Latin America, to continue the work they have been developing on the implementation of strategies to build bridges between the countries of South and North America on the question of how to continue building those bridges for the common good.
The common good, the famous phrase, the common good. But what are they doing? Working for the countries of South and North America. For what? So that immigration keeps going up more and more, and a lot of that migration, what religion is it? Catholic. And if you go along with the politics of what is being said here in the United States, you will find that it makes the Democrats or the Republicans especially fearful. Which of the two? That majority of people who are steadily rising may lead to elections, because they may get a vote even to pull this country to a certain side. Well, think about that every time you see one political party or another speaking, because someone is working to achieve this. You'll say, so you're anti-immigration? No, but there are things that are done with a semblance of good in order to pursue an objective. Therefore, we cannot be so deluded. We have to analyze things, because there is a game that, all this, do you know for whom it is being done? In truth, in order to go against the authentic people of God. And we can see this kind of news and we don't even realize it, but all this will be to impose the Sunday law, to go against the authentic Sabbath-keeping Christians. And it doesn't seem to have a connection? Well, it does have a connection. This and all that we are seeing and showing. Well, so much for the news review. Now, what we are going to see the book The Great Controversy, once again remembering the previous series related to this same subject of the Civil War in the United States. In this book, Ellen White comes to write things that, after having seen the other two series plus what we have seen today and what we will see in these three parts that we have left, allows us to retain all the details, because you will see how everything is coming together just as it was prophesied. We based ourselves on this chapter of the book that we edited in Spanish, from the old format of the original in English, which was entitled The Goals of the Papacy. This is the key to absolutely everything, you know. I was about to skip this when I wanted to present everything that is happening about the Civil War that is being prepared in the United States. I was already going to dedicate myself to a part of it because I believed that it was what I was already going to touch on as a consequence. But I forgot a chapter that is basic, and that is the one that is forging everything, and it was written. You will see what interesting things we find here. That's why I tell you there will still be another part, another batch of lectures about the Civil War. Because yes, in this book there are things that tell us. Romanism is now regarded by Protestants with far greater favor than in former years. This was written by Ellen White in her time, in about 1860. She was already saying that things were changing. We all remember the history of Protestantism in Europe, what Catholicism was doing with this whole issue, but now the Protestants, in her time, were already beginning to notice something that was changing the situation. Well, imagine now from the years when Ellen White wrote until our time, if the question has not changed, have you seen the news we presented before, mixing Jews, Muslims, Protestants, and Catholics? Well, look. In those countries where Catholicism is not in the ascendancy, and the papists are taking a conciliatory course in order to gain influence, there is an increasing indifference concerning the doctrines that separate the Reformed churches from the papal hierarchy. In other words, doctrines are becoming less and less important. It is impressive. Before, because of doctrine, people died. Now it doesn't matter so much. The important thing is to be united. The opinion is gaining ground that, after all, we do not differ so widely upon vital points as has been supposed, and that a little concession on our part will bring us into a better understanding with Rome. The time was when Protestants placed a high value upon the liberty of conscience which had been so dearly purchased. They taught their children to abhor popery and held that to seek harmony with Rome would be disloyalty to God. But how widely different are the sentiments now expressed? When she says now, she's talking about the 19th century, and now haven't we seen even the Adventist Church itself covenanting with Rome in Poland, in about 1970s, if I remember correctly, where they said they would not verbally attack each other. I don't mean simple slaps, eh? Well, it wasn't just about Protestants anymore, it's about the Adventist Church too. And since a few years ago, aren't you shocked to see this? Yes, yes. Also this afternoon, notice what they are doing is getting a little bit closer. The doctrine does not matter so much. What are they doing? Betraying Christ and His Word. Well, look how it goes on. The defenders of the papacy declare that the church has been maligned, and the Protestant world are inclined to accept the statement. Many urge that it is unjust to judge the church of today by the abominations and absurdities that marked her reign during the centuries of ignorance and darkness. Yes, and we hear this from Protestants and Catholics themselves who are saying, well, those were other times. The Inquisition was carried out because there were other ways of thinking. Not now. There can no longer be a death penalty, they are telling you. They themselves fight for that. You have to have religious freedom. They are the champions of this too, when they were the opposite. And now they are like that. You remember all those times of sexual abuses and so many other things that were already being done during the time they were in charge and that are now coming to light. Many things were other times. You cannot judge things in the same way. So, there is an excuse, and that is not so serious anymore. Now things have changed. So, what do they achieve? Changing people's thinking so that they see them in a good light. But it is interesting when she says, they excuse her horrible cruelty as the result of the barbarism of the times and plead that the influence of modern civilization has changed her sentiments. It is impressive. Have these persons forgotten the claim of infallibility put forth for 800 years by this haughty power? Now it would be 1,000 years because a few more years have already passed. So far from being relinquished, this claim was affirmed in the 19th century with greater positiveness than ever before. As Rome asserts that the Church never erred, nor will it, according to the Scriptures, ever err, how can she renounce the principles which governed her course in past ages? Of course, if he was not mistaken, the Pope was infallible, yes, when he spoke ex cathedra and so on. But what happened to all that was being done for so many years? Messing it up. And lo and behold, that stands. Papal infallibility at the time is still there. Yes, the Pope will show up asking for forgiveness for things of the past, etc., 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 but they continue to maintain the same. That does not change. And the saddest thing is that Protestants no longer think about this, and people in general no longer think about papal infallibility. That is history of the past. So many people do not even know about it. The Papal Church will never relinquish her claim to infallibility. Therefore, you will see that this never happens and will never happen, always infallible. All that she has done in her persecution of those who reject her dogmas she holds to be right, and would she not repeat the same acts should the opportunity be presented? In other words, whenever they regain power, wouldn't they do the same thing again? Well, that is what they will do again. Let the restraints now imposed by secular governments be removed and Rome be reinstated in her former power, and there would speedily be a revival of her tyranny and persecution. Do you think this is a statement of a crazy anti-Catholic fanatic? She is telling is a really big truth. Because this is what will happen again, and the prophecy is clear. Whoever disregards the prophecy and does not see how the Vatican moves from behind will fall into deception. A well-known writer speaks thus of the attitude of the papal hierarchy as regards freedom of conscience, and of the perils which especially threaten the United States from the success of her policy. Pay attention now, because this directly affects you who live here. There are many who are disposed to attribute any fear of Roman Catholicism in the United States to bigotry or childishness. Such see nothing in the character and attitude of Romanism that is hostile to our free institutions, or find nothing portentous in its growth. That is to say, and that it is rising and ascending in power. Let us, then, first compare some of the fundamental principles of our government with those of the Catholic Church. The Constitution of the United States guarantees liberty of conscience. Nothing is dearer or more fundamental. By the way, look at the image below, which is an illustration of the proclamation of the dogma of papal infallibility. Pope Pius IX, in his encyclical letter of August 15, 1854, said, "On July 18, 1870, the dogma of papal infallibility was proclaimed in the Vatican, in Rome, and it is still there." Look at what Pope Pius IX said in the encyclical of August 15, 1854. "The absurd and erroneous doctrines or ravings in defense of liberty of conscience are a most pestilential error, a pest, of all others, most to be dreaded in a state." Wow, but now they're saying there's religious freedom and I don't know what else. And that was in 1854. The same Pope, in his encyclical letter of December 8, 1864, anathematized those who assert the liberty of conscience and of religious worship, also all such as maintain that the Church may not employ force. It's just brutal, brutal. The pacific tone of Rome in the United States does not imply a change of heart. She is tolerant where she is helpless. Says Bishop O'Connor, religious liberty is merely endured until the opposite can be carried into effect without peril to the Catholic world. The Archbishop of St. Louis. You see, and we are in St. Louis now. What a coincidence, don't you think? Did I provoke this to come out here precisely? Sister, you set this up, didn't you? Well, look how curious it is. The Archbishop of St. Louis once said, heresy and unbelief are crimes, and in Christian countries, as in Italy and Spain, for instance, where all the people are Catholics, and where the Catholic religion is an essential part of the law of the land, they are punished as other crimes. Yes, we experienced this in Spain. Every cardinal, archbishop, and bishop in the Catholic Church takes an oath of allegiance to the Pope, in which occur the following words, heretics, schismatics, and rebels to our said Lord, the Pope, or his aforesaid successors, I will to my utmost persecute and oppose. Josiah Strong, Our Country, Chapter 5, paragraphs 2-4. It is true that there are real Christians in the Roman Catholic Communion. This should not be forgotten. One thing is its leaders, its top, and another thing is the people. There are all kinds, as everywhere. There are good people who are in error, in deceit, but they are good people. Thousands in that church are serving God according to the best light they have. They are not allowed access to His Word, and therefore they do not discern the truth. And now the Pope says you have to read the Bible every day. What's going on? Do we realize that when they don't have the power, they move differently? Once they have it, they go back to what they really are. They have never seen the contrast between a living heart service and a round of mere forms and ceremonies. God looks with pitying tenderness upon these souls, educated as they are in a faith that is delusive and unsatisfying. He will cause rays of light to penetrate the dense darkness that surrounds them. He will reveal to them the truth as it is in Jesus, and many will yet take their position with His people. Therefore, there will be a lot of Catholic people who will become a part of the real people of God, of the real sheepfold. But Romanism as a system is no more in harmony with the gospel of Christ now than at any former period in her history. The Protestant churches are in great darkness, or they would discern the signs of the times. The Roman Church is far-reaching in her plans and modes of operation. We are seeing it, eh? How they work in so many areas. She is employing every device to extend her influence and increase her power in preparation for a fierce and determined conflict to regain control of the world, to reestablish persecution, and to undo all that Protestantism has done. Regain the governance of the world. When you talk about the New World Order, what do you think is his? The rulers of the world, and sometimes people don't relate these concepts. It's not only a question of Freemasonry, it's also about the papacy. Catholicism is gaining ground upon every side. See the increasing number of her churches and chapels in Protestant countries. Look at the popularity of her colleges and seminaries in America, so widely patronized by Protestants. What are the most famous universities in the United States? The Catholic ones are the most highly regarded. Well, they must also have done something very positive to be considered that way. They must have worked very well to achieve it. Look at the growth of ritualism in England and the frequent defections to the ranks of the Catholics. You know, this was happening before with many Anglicans. It was not only Mr. Newman, famous for having become a Catholic saint while he was an Anglican, but every year there are people who are moving from Anglicanism to Catholicism, and there are more and more of them. Do you know why? Because of morals. Because they see that Anglicanism is allowing things that Catholicism did not tolerate. And now it tells us something else. These things should awaken the anxiety of all who prize the pure principles of the gospel. Protestants have tampered with and patronized popery. Well, I would say that the Adventist Church has done the same thing. Indeed, they have done it. They have made compromises and concessions which papists themselves are surprised to see and fail to understand. In other words, even they are surprised at how the protesters are giving them an excuse for everything. Evidently, the infiltration has caused them to go down that road, but once the infiltration is doing its job well, the rest of the people do not react. They fall for it. Men are closing their eyes to the real character of Romanism and the dangers to be apprehended from her supremacy. The people need to be aroused to resist the advances of this most dangerous foe to civil and religious liberty. And now, you say this and you are anti-Catholic, they tell you, and that's it. But that is not going against Catholics, but against what the leadership is doing. Those satanic plans, they have to dominate the world. This is the big difference. Many Protestants suppose that the Catholic religion is unattractive and that its worship is a dull, meaningless round of ceremony. Here they mistake. While Romanism is based upon deception, it is not a coarse and clumsy imposture. The religious service of the Roman Church is a most impressive ceremonial. Its gorgeous display and solemn rites fascinate the senses of the people and silence the voice of reason and of conscience. The eye is charmed. Magnificent churches, imposing processions, golden altars, jeweled shrines, choice paintings, and exquisite sculpture appeal to the love of beauty. The ear also is captivated. The music is unsurpassed. The rich notes of the deep-toned organ, blending with the melody of many voices as it swells through the lofty domes and pillared aisles of her grand cathedrals, cannot fail to impress the mind with awe and reverence. Has that ever happened to you? Have you ever been in Catholic churches when they start doing a whole process with their attire and stuff? Those chants in that place that resonates, everything is impressive. They know how to look for the senses. Well, I'll back up the picture so you can get a view of what the inside of a church might look like. This outward splendor, pomp, and ceremony that only mocks the longings of the sin-sick soul is an evidence of inward corruption. The religion of Christ needs not such attractions to recommend it. In the light shining from the cross, true Christianity appears so pure and lovely that no external decorations can enhance its true worth. It is the beauty of holiness, a meek and quiet spirit, which is of value with God. Brilliancy of style is not necessarily an index of pure, elevated thought. High conceptions of art, delicate refinement of taste, often exist in minds that are earthly and sensual. They are often employed by Satan to lead men to forget the necessities of the soul, to lose sight of the future, immortal life, to turn away from their infinite helper, and to live for this world alone. We end this part here. We have already seen that the things we have shown appear here. Well, we will still see more, because you will see what news we are going to show. But you will also see what Ellen White's writings also speak of this. And they truly denote not only her knowledge of the past, which is becoming less and less common, but they also show a prophetic revelation of fulfillment in our days. And once again it must be said, they prove that Ellen White was a prophetess of the Lord. And there is no doubt of it at all. Let's take a short break and continue later with the second part.